It's difficult to know how much to call this election a win for the Liberals and how much a defeat for their opponents. Certainly for the governing Conservatives, this is little short of a fiasco and one from which they have to shoulder their share of the blame. Remember, it's very hard for a majority government in this country to get itself defeated. It's only been 4 such occasions since 1935, and in each of those there were other circumstances that can explain it. In 1957, you had a government that had been in power for 22 years and had widely been agreed to have lost the plot. In 1935, 1984, and 1993, you had governments that had gone through just terrible, terrible economic conditions, and people tend to want to throw the bums out when the economy is bad. And in 1993, again, you had a government that had done big things, had the free trade agreement, the GST, and ultimately Meech Lake, that had costed a lot of political capital and ultimately broke apart its coalition. None of those conditions apply here. The economy is not in that bad shape. The government's only been in power with a majority for 4 years, and it really hasn't done a great deal to upset people in terms of policies. It hasn't really spent any political capital or taken any big risks. It's just really annoyed people to death. And by the time the election had come around, there had been so much, autocratic high-handedness and officially sanctioned duplicity and messing around with Parliament's prerogatives that people were pretty heartily fed up with to begin with, let alone the campaign that they ran, which was essentially just a recitation of past achievements such as they are, coupled with don't go with the other guys. That's not a very inspiring message. The NDP, for their part, I think thought this was going to turn into a 2-horse race pretty quickly, that the Liberals would fade from view shortly after the election begun. Remember, they'd started with only 25% of the vote, and that people would come to the NDP as the only logical alternative to the governing Conservatives. So they took very little risks, ran a very safe, cautious campaign, and in the end didn't really light a fire under anybody. But as much as you can criticize the other campaigns, you have to give this to the Liberals and to Justin Trudeau in particular. They had the right message, they had the right strategy, and they were able to capture the mood of those voters who were looking for a change of government and indeed a change of governing style. In particular, I think the story arc, if you will, of Justin Trudeau was a big part of this. And the fact that he is the son of Pierre Trudeau can't be left out of that. My theory is a large section of the public, whether they knew it or not, were kind of willing him to succeed. We tend to look at politics through storylines, and there's the whole sort of Prince Hal, the feckless youth who grows up to be the king, that people, I think, subconsciously perhaps wanted to see played out here. But he had to earn it. He had to show that he was willing to do the hard work, to be disciplined, to toughen up, to take the slings and arrows and those sorts of cliches. And in the end, he did. And maybe the long campaign was the biggest thing that assisted him. Going from 25% of the polls at the beginning to nearly 40% at the end is an extraordinary achievement and one that he can take a great deal of credit for.